Welcome to another show, everybody. Jim Hall, You Ought to Know, and we're in Victorville, California at the Victorville Fire Museum. Take a look right back here. This used to be one of the fire departments. It says established in 1926. Today, we're going to take a look at the Victorville Fire Museum. A lot of history, a lot of facts, and we're going to meet Greg Kuhn coming up simply because, like with all of our shows, we're going to get a little facts on the city of Victorville at the Fire Museum right back here simply because you ought to know. Stay with us. A great show coming up. Welcome back, everybody. Jim Hall, You Ought to Know. And I told you we're here in the city of Victorville. A lot of history here. It goes back a long way. First off, Greg, introduce yourself.
I'm Greg Kuhn with the San Bernardino County Fire Department, a hazardous materials specialist.
Well, that's all changed recently here in the city of Victorville.
Yes, it is.
Because the city of Victorville operated a fire department starting when?
We started our fire department way back in 1926.
26. What was here in 1926?
In 1926, Victorville was a pretty small city. What we know as Old Town Victorville now, that's all there was in Victorville. Southwest Portland Cement, the railroad track, that's pretty much what made up the city of Victorville.
Now, I know a little bit after 30-some years here, and I hear people talk about the fact that the fairgrounds, if old downtown Victorville was the main portion of town, they went to the fair, and the fairgrounds is exactly where it is, but they had to go south quite a ways.
That would have been in the boonies. Yeah. That's the boondocks back then, yeah.
In fact, the landfill, the dump, was where Victor Valley High School sits.
Wow, yeah.
So a lot of changes over time.
A lot of changes.
So the department started in 1926, and how did it start out? As what?
I'm actually going to take you back even farther than that. We can go all the way back into the early teens, the 1914, 1915, 1916, where it wasn't a volunteer fire department, but they had fire brigades. They had wheeled fire extinguishers like we would see here in the downtown Victorville area, and it was more for the citizens, if there was a fire, that they were to get the fire extinguisher and put the fires out. In 1924, some of the founding fathers of the city, they got together at a businessman's luncheon, and they talked about forming a fire protection district. And the important part about that was it's all about tax money, because it takes money to make a fire department.
Well, we see pictures, though. You see pictures going back. For instance, if you're the Green Tree Inn, some restaurants around town have pictures too, old D Street and some of the old pictures. There were buildings here. There was businesses here. There was a population of how many back then?
Several thousand, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 or 6,000 people. Yeah. And a major part of getting a fire department, a fire district organized was the insurance ratings, because without a organized volunteer fire department, the businesses, the residents were paying a very high premium on their insurances.
Even the bureaucracy back then, trying to get things done.
Yes, sir, even the bureaucracy back then.
All right, so we have, this is old buckets would hang here. You have water that could be pumped through this, and this, did they have a couple of these around the town?
From what we could tell, they had 4 of these in and around the downtown area. They were probably, downtown wasn't that big, so probably spread out about every 2,000 or 3,000 feet in the downtown area.
All right, and they did have fires back then that they had to try and contain, and a lot of times they lost the buildings.
In most cases, the buildings did burn down. This would be great for a trash can that's on fire, but other than that, it's not going to do anything on a big commercial building.
All right, so let's pick it up there for a few years, and what happened then?
In 1930 is when we organized with what we know now, or what we did know now as the Victorville Volunteer Fire Department. And that was organized in 1930. we purchased this apparatus right here, which is a 1930 Aaron's Fox.
So let's walk over toward it a little bit. That Aaron's Fox I'm familiar with because I've seen it in Christmas parades and it's been out there. And you were describing this to me as how?
Oh, this is the Rolls-Royce of fire engines, and we could go on a fire right now. It pumps 500 gallons of water per minute. This is an awesome fire truck. It really cracks me up because being in the fire service for so long with budgetary constraints and controls, this was the Rolls-Royce. This was the best that money could buy in 1930. And with today's fire engines, we're so much cut with budgets that sometimes we always don't get what we want. But in 1930, the boys certainly got the best of the best.
All right, this was sold for about how much new when they first bought this?
This fire truck was around $8,000 brand new.
And today, what's the value on this? If you were to have to resell this today for any given reason, and a collector wanted this?
$40,000 to $50,000 fire truck. And this is not the most primo of all the Aaron's Foxes. There are ones that are nicer than this. But
this one is in really good shape.
This one is in perfect shape, probably just as good as it when it left the factory.
All right, so they had this, and this was stationed where originally? What was the first fire station with this in it?
We're actually in the location. This was not the building, but they had a wood barn here in 1940. But really, prior to that, it was in Claude Goodwill's garage, which was our very first fire chief. He had a repair garage here in Victorville. It was stored there for a while, and then it was stored at Southwest Portland Cement for a while. And you can notice that the steering wheel is burnt on it. The little firehouse they had at the cement plant actually burned down, and they pushed this fire truck out before it burned up. Another fire truck we had burned up in the fire.
All right, well, this one survived it.
Beautiful.
So how did the museum happen to come into possession of this one?
The fire district, or Fire District Firemen's Association, has always owned the fire truck. So it was just kind of given to us through the city, through time. Because when we went city in 1976, everything became possession of the city of Victorville. The city of Victorville gave it to the Victorville Firemen's Association. They restored it. Captain Warren Peterson with Victorville at the time, Battalion Chief Warren Peterson now. He put a lot of work and effort into this fire engine, and he restored it in the mid to late 80s.
All right. Well, we're going to see this one run. We're actually going to see it out on the street here today. And we're going to be back and talk about the Victor Valley Fire Museum, what it takes to go in to be a part of this. In fact, how can you come and see it? We'll tell you about that. Simply because, like with all of our shows, you ought to know. Stay with us. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back, everybody. Jim Hall, you ought to know. And Greg, first off, introduce yourself again.
Greg Kuhn, San Bernardino County Fire Department.
And we are officially, what's the name of the museum here in town?
The name of the museum is the Victorville Firemen's Museum.
Okay. And who runs this?
It used to be the Victorville Firemen's Association. Now it's the Victorville Firemen's Historical Society.
Okay, Historical Society. And can people join the society, firemen? Or
anyone can be a member of the society.
how do they do it?
They can contact me at 760-955-5229. Okay. And we need all the volunteers we can get, that's for sure.
Well, in this modern age, we're seeing a lot of neat old things. A lot of some old Motorola mics on the dispatch center and so on. But in this modern age, is there a website for the museum?
It's on the City of Victorville's website, so okay, they can go to City of Victorville.
You can actually access it through the city. And a lot of history here. It goes back a long way. Names that we see that we've known. People around town. I mentioned to you Larry Huber, an old picture of Larry here.
Larry Huber from Victorville Glass, a longtime sponsor of our fire museum, rose to the ranks of assistant fire chief here.
Well, and there's names like Butts, Goodwill, a lot of other names. You mentioned Ernie Kraft.
Ernie Kraft was a longtime member here from 1932 all the way up to 1975.
And Ernie rose to the ranks of what?
Ernie rose to the ranks of assistant chief. Leland Butts, another longtime member. His wife was actually city council member here for many, many years.
So it was very much family-oriented and kind of continues with that tradition. A lot of sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters involved in somewhere in the city.
It sure does. The building we were in the 50s, this was the bingo hall. Every Saturday night they would play bingo here. All the firefighters, all the families would get together and play bingo here every Saturday night.
Well, you were telling me some interesting facts. Of the fact about an apartment, a couple of little apartment, or what we would consider not even probably just like very small. I wouldn't even call them apartments.
Yeah, they're pretty small. They're probably about 800 square feet each. The rule was that for $1 a month, 2 of the firefighter families could live there. One of the wives had to be home. The husbands, obviously, they worked. Southwest Portland Cement, Continental Telephone, or had their own business here in town, or worked from one of the other businesses. But the wife had to be home. We didn't have a 911 system in those days, so the public would just call the house. They had a central telephone between the 2 little apartments. One of the wives would answer the phone. She would get the information on whether it was a car accident, whether it was a fire, whether it was a brush fire. She would get that information.
All right.
And she would write it down on a chalkboard. She would walk outside and she would ring a siren that's out there.
All right, so I'd call in on a regular phone, and in those days it used to be not even a 243, 245 number. It was usually like Chapel Hill or Victor Valley or whatever the abbreviation was, and you dial the number, which was usually CH38291 or whatever it was, and they would get the wife on the phone. The wife would take the call, write it down on the chalkboard where the fire is, go outside, get the siren going, and then what would happen?
She would stand out there and hold this up, and then the firefighters would drive by, and they would drive their cars directly to the fire engine if these fire trucks at this station were already gone.
Well, remember, we have to think small now. The city wasn't that big, so it was all down the town area.
Well, again, and I got to kind of step back and kind of laugh because, 5, 6, 7, 8 blocks, they would know where the fire was at.
Well, and they'd certainly hear the siren all over, so everybody knew something was going on.
Yeah, and the siren, there's actually 2 here in town, and they weren't originally put in here for the fire department. They were put in here in the 30s because of the flooding that Victorville had in the 30s from the Big Bear Arrowhead area.
Okay. Well, as that went, and as the signs go, and as the, how long did they use this method of standing out on the street?
Up until can you believe it, up until 1963. And that's when they first started getting the radios put in the fire engines. The beepers, which we carry today, which are really small, they said the beepers back in those days would cover the entire front seat of a vehicle.
And I imagine they would. If computers used to fill an entire room, beepers were just as large. Now look at this. This is an old dispatch, and I was referring, I grew up in an apartment with Motorola, the old Motorola mics, and here we've got the setup. And you were telling us, Greg, you kind of built this to be representative of a dispatch center in the old station here, and you nailed it right on the head.
And I had no idea this is where they did the dispatch center.
This was it.
This was it. And even it was so personal back in those days is we had files of every citizen that lived in the city. So when Mabel Smith called, we could see, the dispatcher could say, "Hey Mabel, how you doing? How's Fred? How's his blood pressure going?" Because we would have all the medical information of the family.
So you had it all.
You just don't have that these days.
No, too many people, too big. We've grown. Everything has changed. Technology has gotten better, supposedly. Yep. And so the changes went on. Now, as the museum goes, you've been able to obtain a lot of memorabilia, a lot of personal items such as badges from old firefighters, assistant chiefs.
Yeah, it was playing detective, especially on the badges now. And I got to admit, I was one of the guys who used to load up a bunch of the old fire stuff, and with Chief Cabarellas, we'd take it down and we'd donate it to Mexico, long before we thought we'd do a museum. And then when we started putting the museum together, I'm like, God, I wish I had that stuff back, because a lot of our history ended up in Mexico.
Well, have you gone back to our sister station, our sister cities at all in Mexico and said, hey, remember us? If you get rid of anything, we'd like to have it back for the museum.
Yeah, I didn't get a very favorable response out of that one.
No, they utilize everything they can and pass it on to other cities as well. But this sort of thing that you do here is something that people can come and see. Now, we're going to do a ride on the fire truck.
Yes,
you ready to do that?
Sure.
And then we're going to talk about how people can get involved and come and see the museum, okay?
Great.
All right, stay with us, everybody. We're here at the Victorville Fire Museum. We're on 8th Street in Victorville, simply because, like with all of our shows, you ought to know. Stay with us. We're going for a ride next. Welcome back, everybody. Jim Hall, you ought to know, and I told you we're here in Victorville. The Victorville Fire Museum, and Greg, again, the Fire Museum has been here how long?
10 years. We opened up in April of April of year 2000.
And as you opened that, what was that like trying to get this together to make it happen?
That was 6 months of my life, every night down here on my spare time, working at this place with just a bunch of volunteers, both working at this fire station because we had to put a new roof on it, we had to paint it. We got a lot of contractors that came in here and helped us out with the plumbing, the electrical, the painting, some of the drywall, and then go out and doing fundraising. And we raised about $25,000, $26,000 to put this together.
Well, is this something that somebody said, we want you to kind of spearhead this and get it going? Your idea? How did it happen?
Several of our past members, Warren Peterson, Vance Caswell, they had talked about it in the early 90s and actually had started a fund to start raising some money, but it just kind of didn't go anywhere. I have an awesome love for the fire department and history of the city of Victorville itself, so I kind of spearheaded this in early 1999 and just started going from there.
Well, as things took off, first off, let's get some background on you now. Did you come from another department when you got here?
No, I was born and raised in Orange County. Was a correctional officer, moved up here for the affordable housing in 1986, and came up here with my family and started out like a lot of people as a volunteer firefighter, paid call firefighter with the city of Victorville.
Well, and you did get paid. It seems like if you got called and you responded, how much did they pay you?
I think I was lucky. I think when I started it was around $5 an hour, but I talked to a lot of people and they said 80 cents, $1, $1.20.
So it's as it was. Now, are there still paid call firefighters in San Bernardino County?
Yes, San Bernardino County has a large contingent of paid call firefighters. It's the staple and the backbone of the fire service.
Well, we're going to take a little ride. You ready? We're going to get on the truck and take a ride. And while we do that, let's kind of walk over this direction, and we're going to get the truck going. Now, again, the truck that we're riding on is what? That's
a 1930 Aaron's Fox, original to the Victorville Fire Department.
This one does a lot of events. You've done the parades. How many events do you take it out for?
We used to do the fair. We do the Christmas parade. 4 or 5 other events a year that we use this on.
What about there's Fire Week where people you go on parades or they still get out and do that?
They usually take the modern fire engines to the schools, and we still do that. It's the first week of every October, Fire Prevention Week. We take the modern fire trucks out there to show them.
And how many, everybody remembers, this may be, this particular station was used up till what year?
The station was used up until 1988.
And then we know about the one that's at the fairgrounds. Everybody knows that as 311.
311 was built in 1974, and that is still the headquarters station for the city of Victorville.
And after that, how many other stations now in the city itself?
Total of 5 fire stations within the city of Victorville, and we have one also out at Southern California Logistics Airport.
And that's all run what used to be under the auspices of the city of Victorville.
Under the city, now it's operated by San Bernardino County Fire Department.
And that transition, how's that been? What has that been like for the firefighters, the city itself? Good relationship? Excellent relationship.
You know, on one hand, it's kind of a family that kind of went away because a lot of the firefighters were born and raised here. But on the other hand, it's a larger organization. There's more opportunity. I haven't talked to one person who hasn't been happy about the changeover, including myself.
Well, I would think it's kind of like having a small family and finding out you got a lot more relatives that you never knew, because firefighters, it's kind of a unique situation.
That's true. And most of the original Victorville firefighters have actually transferred out of the city. They're at other fire departments. They're stretching their legs, seeing what else is out there.
That's the way to do it. Now, I got to show you some of these things here at the museum. Take a look, everybody, as we conclude this ride on this Aaron's Fox. Beautiful thing. But what do we got here? This is an old fire chief. I recognize this. Pumped at him a few times.
Yeah, this isn't original to anything with the fire department, but I just thought it looked pretty cool in the fire station. An old Texaco fire chief gas pump.
Why not? It's got the fire chief hat on it. We even have, I remember paying that price, 21 cents a gallon.
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah. Well, I started driving in whatever it was, 67, I guess, and I was paying that. And if we had a gas war on all 4 corners, used to be gas stations, it went down to 19 cents, so it was a good thing. And then all of a sudden, the big rise in gas. But you got that in here. We have, look at an old pole And you got the emblem there, Victorville Firemen's Association emblem there, and the old pole coming down. Now, how often did they actually come down this pole?
Well, again, this is a one-story building, so I just kind of put this in here just to kind of teach the young kids the history of the fire department with the fire pole that actually started with Chicago Fire Department back in the 1800s. But more, the history for the high desert is Victorville Fire Station 311, San Bernardino County Fire Station 311, is the only fire station in the high desert that's two-story, that has a pole for them for the firefighters to slide down, and they still use it today.
So they actually do have sleeping quarters up above. They actually can get on the pole and make their way down. They don't have to fight stairs. They got an access immediate to the fire engines.
The traditional way in the fire service that every station should have.
All right. Well, you do have a lot of technology in here. And now your hours, real quick, before we wrap it up, people can come see the museum when?
Hours are every Saturday from 10 to 6, or if they have a special tour, a school tour, a church tour, a Boy Scout, Girl Scout, they can give me a call again at 760-955-5229, and we'll open it up 24/7 for them.
So if they've got a group and you're going to accommodate them, you'll bring them in and let them see the history that's all right here.
Yes, sir.
All right, Greg, thank you so much for being on this show.
I appreciate it.
We're here, again, at the Victorville Fire Museum. I got to tell you, a lot of history here. I know a lot of people have come through the department. You're going to see a lot of those pictures and names. And again, take the time, come down on a Saturday when they're open, and take a look around. You're going to really enjoy it. Why did we come? Simply because Greg came to us and said, you need to do a show on the museum, and because you ought to know. Stay with us. I'll be right back to wrap it up. Well, that's going to put the wraps on another show, everybody. Jim Hall, you ought to know, from the Victorville Fire Museum. And Greg, real quick, you have a special event coming up, big anniversary.
We do. June 19th, which is Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., we're going to have our 10-year anniversary. We're going to block off the street. We're going to have antique fire trucks out front. We're going to have a large cadre of retired firefighters here from the department, and hot dogs and hamburgers, and have a great time.
All right, we're going to be here, and we hope you will be too, simply because, like with all of our shows, everybody, you ought to know. We'll see you at the anniversary, June 19th.